All right. Good evening, everyone. I am the Mad Computer Scientist, and this is my guest, Ember.
Hello.
On this channel, I like to discuss math, computer science, and tech topics that are of interest to me, but on Friday nights, I do something a little bit different. And ideally, we're going to be pointing out flaws in their argument, but I'm not even sure they're making an argument in this one. If there is, I don't know what it is. So tonight, we're going to return to Real Science Radio.
Oh, good.
And they have a stream called Want Gender Clarity, Society Under Fire. But before we begin, first of all, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do so. Like, comment, and subscribe. If you find my content useful, share this video out. And hopefully I'll get back to more topics soon because I will have more time to do them. In the meantime, Ember, please tell us where people can find you.
I'm all over the place, most frequently on the Transpositions weekly news show for trans people. I also have my own channel for counter apologetics and whatnot here on YouTube's at Better Than Ember. And I'm in a bunch of other places. All my links are on my website, betterthanember.com.
And I should have remembered this is a holiday weekend, so we're probably not going to get a lot of people in.
Future people are fine viewers as well. But do remember, folks, if you want to engage in the live chat, make sure you ring the notification bell as well as subscribe. Because, watching after the fact, fantastic, super job. But being here live, you get to heckle, and that can be fun.
And let's share the screen. Make sure I share sound and make sure the sound is up on the other screen because Firefox has issues or going between browsers and StreamYard because StreamYard does not work well with Firefox. Can play havoc with the sound.
Oh, wee.
So let's see if we're going. Oh, I need to start over here.
Just a scholarly term for deranged pervert.
All right.
Well.
So let's go back and catch the beginning of that because it was a little bit. Because there's some vital context that is missing.
Sexologist is just a scholarly term for deranged pervert. Anyone.
She's not completely wrong.
I mean, to be fair, Kinsey did go out and interview people about sex.
I was thinking there's a whole bunch there. John Money had a small club of sexologists who were very interested in some very unethical things.
And we will be hearing the term John Money. The name. Because as you know, these people believe John Money invented gender.
Yeah, we hear that one a lot.
Yes.
So basically, this seems to be not even a non sequitur. The logic just doesn't connect.
Anyone with the title of sexologist should be kept far away from children.
Stay away
I can't disagree with that one.
from my daughter.
And your family. You don't even want to touch them with
Any
a
normal
6-foot
people.
pole.
Normal people. I love that they call themselves Real Science Radio when they go out of their way to try to deny all the science, but also that normal people, folks, y'all are Bible thumpers. Own it. You're not normal people. You pride yourselves. You have arrogance about the fact you are not normal people. You're like, we're the chosen, we're the specialist. We have the real truth, not this science nonsense. Own it.
Also, I would like to apologize to any future sexologist who might see this.
It's true. Are there still sexologists?
Yes.
Brightest audience.
I'm not really sure after some of the stuff Governor Braun has been pulling if Indiana University is still going to have the Kinsey Institute, because he tried to replace the Indiana University Board of Directors with his own appointees, and he may succeed if the ACL's lawsuit does not.
In creation, welcome to Real Science Radio. I'm Doug McBurney.
And I'm Nicole McBurney. It's good to be on the air talking about real science on Friday.
Oh, it's a family show. Yay!
And I'm going to leave the comment I had at the door for now.
That's right. It's Real Science Radio, and Fred Williams is on assignment this week. And so we're joined today by Real Science Radio contributing editor and producer Nicole McBurney with some analysis on one of the more important stories of the 21st century. And to set it up, I want to look back to the 20th century briefly, because I remember listening to a radio talk show in 1994.
There was a radio in 1994? Holy shit, what an amazing discovery.
And they had talk shows on them. I've seen it, so I know it's not going to be Rush Limbaugh, although this would be about the time he started to become popular.
Well,
the talk show host.
I mean, he was still growing in the 90s, but he was in a lot. I mean, he was there before they canceled the Fairness Doctrine. It was when Reagan did away with that he did his pivot into hard right grift that got him growing really big. But he was a talking head before then as well.
Yes, but the Fairness Doctrine was canceled in the late 90s, and Limbaugh became big when I was in high school, which was the early to mid 90s.
Liddy, and he was warning his listeners that the subtle replacement of the word sex with gender was happening, and he noticed it.
And you know who I
Hold
always...
on.
Oh, sorry.
So this replacement of sex with gender thing, that's because of the conservatives, this Puritan streak in these cowardly bitches. They were like, oh, we can't talk about sex with our children. We have to refer to it as gender. It's the polite terminology.
Well, personally, the first person I always go to for my science news is a talk radio host.
Preferably on AM channels.
And especially not even one known for covering science content.
Because he's kind of a word geek. He noticed it and he said, this is, first of all, it's grammatically incorrect. And second, he noted that this was not by accident. Now, Nicole, you don't remember this, but the early 1990s were the full court press of the homosexual rights movement. The first full court press open out there.
No.
He wants to talk about history and he immediately starts getting the history wrong. That's amazing. Anita Bryant, Phyllis Schlafly, the homosexual revolution had been going since the fucking 60s, you know?
Athena, can you please move away from my mouse? That's not the type of mouse you want to hunt anyway.
Everywhere. And G. Gordon Liddy noticed during this full court press to normalize perversion.
Perversion even.
I'm glad this guy is unbiased as we're getting so close to Pride Month this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he calls it perversion because, you know, he's a Bible thumper, whatever. But like, his issue is the difference between homosexuals and heterosexuals is sexuality, which is why he considers homosexuals to be inherently sexual, because the key characteristic that makes the difference has to do with sex. But that works the same way in reverse. Like, he's out here saying, I'm not a gay man. Don't look at me like that. Don't hit on me, yada, yada. That's because of his sexual orientation. So he's out here being in your face about his sexuality. By his own definition, he is a pervert.
Yeah, I don't know. I think a gay man would have to be pretty desperate to hit on him.
I don't know a gay person that you could even pay enough.
And anyone who's attracted to intelligence is going to stay away from this guy.
Word sex was subtly and slowly being replaced in the media by the
Oh my gosh, you mean languages change over time?
What? What do you
Alert
mean?
Sorry.
Why
Alert
are,
a linguist immediately.
why are we not speaking Latin or Gaelic?
Quid? I remember so little of my high school Latin.
Word gender, and he said it wasn't an accident, and he said there were nefarious motives behind it. And so now, fast
It's
forward
a
30 years, and
conspiracy.
we're in the midst of what some have dubbed the collapse of Western civilization into gender insanity. Help us understand.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
okay. So Western civilization, the remnants of the old Roman Empire, not to be confused with the Eastern Roman Empire, because that would be the East. It's collapsing now. Over 1,000 years after Rome fell, now the West is collapsing, and it's because gay people exist.
Yeah,
Wow.
Doug, of all the things I'm going to say that are affecting America negatively right now, I would say it's people who support Donald Trump and didn't think about their actions before they voted.
I mean, in fairness, they're kind of allergic to thinking, but details.
And
But like, for fuck's sake, it hurts my head on so many levels, because like the West fell ages ago, and also
you're insanity.
oops, sorry. Go ahead.
it's all right. There's just so much. There's so much. We can just go on.
Oh, I actually didn't mean to do that. It was just.
It's all right.
I'd rather just call it insanity, because calling it gender insanity would be
Really? Because I call it nepotism.
adopting the terminology that you have just said is incorrect, or I guess as
Hey, I have the same brand of wearable mic. I just noticed that.
Huh.
Your radio talk show host had said, and I would completely agree with him that it wasn't by accident, and we'll get into the reasons why a little bit later on the show. I would just call it the ultimate manifestation of a century's worth of rebellion against God's design for family.
Yes, that's what it is. It's because the gays hate God. That's what's behind it. Absolutely. Never mind the fact that the modern nuclear family model put forward in the 1950s is not biblical. In the Bible, we see what families look like. We see one man having children with his two daughters because his wife got turned into a pillar of salt. Or we see one man with 200 wives and 300 concubines. Blessed be the meek, or something.
This isn't necessarily a religious channel, but please read the story of Lot fully, because that is how the story ends.
Where did they get the wine to get him drunk?
And by the way, they will be mentioning algorithms later, and unsurprisingly, not understanding.
Well, that's putting quite a fine point on it. And now some people might think that talk of grammatical.
That's a fine point.
I'm sorry, but I keep seeing cat ears on his headphones.
That would be cool. No, I'm just looking at this giant broad brush that he just painted with, and he's going, "Oh, that's putting a fine. You call this a fine point, my dude? You have no idea."
Terms is going to be a dry and boring subject, but this is not dry and boring because
yes,
this
precision of language from the guy who's using terms like full court press to refer to equal rights, and doesn't even understand what fine point on a subject means, or grammatically correct for that matter. But I'm sure we'll get into that. Holy shit. Precision of language.
And I also love that he didn't just contradict himself whatsoever there by saying, this is going to be a dry subject, but it's not going to be a dry subject.
Is it going to be a moist subject?
Analysis of the corruption of our society. And we're going to start in the area of grammar, and then we're going to take it from there. Let's talk about.
Yeah, because grammar is important. That's where we see a lot of. I mean, most changes in language are vocabulary based, but sometimes we see it manifest in grammar, like the thing that was going on a few years ago, where the old school folks were up in arms over the verbification of nouns, like Googling things. You know, and they're like, you can't do that; it's ungrammatical, whatever. But that's not actually how you change a society. They're trying to invoke ideas of 1984, control the language, control the culture, but that's not actually what does change the culture. It's the policies and the laws and the way we go about our daily lives, the way we do our work, the way we do our shopping, the way we get our healthcare. These things alter the shape and the flavor of our society and our civilization. And we see this trend with conservatives all the time. Every accusation is only there because it's a confession. They are trying to control the language, and I'm sure they'll tell on themselves about that as we go on.
About the grammar a little bit. What have you found out?
Yeah, so
All right, just to be clear, she means the linguistic history, not the grammar, because the grammar are the rules of how you put the language together. I mean, yes, grammar can include genders for gendered languages, and the fact that English is largely not a gendered language is an interesting thing historically, as is the fact that we still have gendered pronouns despite that.
so the word gender originally, and I realize that, you know, if people ask me what my gender is, I'm not going to be confused by it because, and this is an argument that people give all the time.
And you know, most trans people aren't confused when you ask them what their gender is either.
Is, well, language changes, so, you know, deal with it. And I recognize that. But the term gender, when used as a noun, was originally a grammatical term for a category or a class that a noun falls into. And the word itself, the word gender, comes from the Latin word genus, which means kind, family, or order. So you're familiar with taxonomy, you know, scientists will classify an animal by their genus. And genus also...
Yes, and I also love how etymology has exactly nothing to do with what words mean now.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a lot to this, right? Like she's minimizing and trying to draw into a specific place rather than exploring the whole subject like we nerds might actually enjoy. There's so many variant descendant terms that come from that, like everything from genesis to genre, like in music or the style of books that you like. Anything you can categorize, you can apply some variant of the term gender to. It just means a category. That's it.
I also love the microscope on his desk.
I was thinking that in the beginning. I'm like, I wonder if he uses that. I wonder if he's on a green screen. Is it really there? Has he read those books? And also, I want the microscope.
I bet he's a real scientist and uses it too.
I'm sure.
An earlier word, or the Proto-Indo-European root gene, or gene, meaning to give birth or to beget. And this same root gives us our words generate, genetic, genealogy, or homogeneous, for example. I mentioned the PIE languages. Are you familiar with the PIE languages?
Well, PI, I'm familiar with pi, and I mean, not just the kind you can eat.
That's Proto-Indo-European, which we don't actually have those languages. We have their descendants, and anthropologists and linguists, historiolinguists, I suppose, have attempted to reconstruct some of the ancestor languages to some extent. This is how we have gotten bits and pieces from some of the oldest inscriptions where there's written language, because things like cuneiform, there are no native speakers anymore. You know, it's a very old language. And I mean, how we've done it with Hebrew, because Hebrew was a dead language. Modern Hebrew is a reconstructed language, and some of the terms are just our best guess.
Well, and we know what Latin sounded like only because we know people were complaining about how people were pronouncing it. So that's why the Catholic pronunciations and the classical Latin pronunciations are not the same.
3.14.
All right.
So
Not according to your Bible.
I was just thinking that too.
am I in the ballpark?
No, not even close. But
No, the Bible gives you a value of pi that gives you 3.
let me give you a third pi for you. This PIE is an acronym. It stands for Proto-Indo-European, and it's the Proto-Indo-European is a reconstruction.
Statistics.
Well, yeah, you can.
We see the evolution of the languages, and but evolution isn't real, folks. Don't pay any attention to the thing the creationists are showing you right now.
Yeah, somewhere there should be a Proto-Germanic in there because
They are missing a few, aren't they? Like Celtic splits into Manx and Irish and what is it? Scottish and Welsh. Where's Gaelic? Where's Gallic? I mean, for fuck's sake.
It's not a real language. So you won't be able to go out into an archaeological dig and find a potsherd that says Arphaxad was here in the Proto-Indo-European language.
Well, no, it was a real language. They just don't know what it sounded like or what the words actually were. They're just, I don't know how they do it, but they're constructing what they think the words probably were based on clues in the languages that they're descended from.
Yeah.
But based on
that's pretty much it. Like we do similar things with the Romance languages. Like take for example in English we say advertisement, and it means a thing that's meant to get your attention, to get you to buy something. Whereas on the continent in French and I think also in Spanish they say avertisement, which means warning, which is to say to get your attention. So we can take those two and trace back a probable original meaning of that word to be something that grabs attention. The purpose it's put to has shifted as the languages have separated, but the function is identical.
off of how language has, I guess, evolved over time and distinguished itself into many other.
Hey,
I love how she put the air quotes around evolved.
It's not even biological evolution. Languages evolve. We've known this.
But languages don't reproduce.
I mean, have you ever even looked at Chaucer in Middle English? It's barely readable.
Oh my goodness. I wanted to like Chaucer so badly, but like as you're probably aware, and some audience members may be, I basically grew up at the Renaissance Fair. I spent every weekend day of every summer from the time I was 3 years old. I love Shakespearean. I can speak it or understand it like a native. I used to be able to speak it fluently, but I'm way out of practice. But Chaucer, it's as far from Shakespeare as Shakespeare is from now, basically, give or take 100 years or so. And it's hard to read.
It's still easier than Beowulf.
That's true.
Distinct languages, linguists can use these patterns and go backwards and reconstruct this mother language, this common ancestor. And this common ancestor encompasses languages all the way from the Indo-Iranian, like Bengali and Hindi, to the Greek and the Germanic and Italic languages. So all the way from India to
No, that's right. Italic is just another word for the Romance languages.
Europe, you will find a common ancestor for these languages here. And that's a a broad area, which is pretty impressive.
Which also
I wouldn't have
is a problem for the Bible, because the Indo-European language range covers Mesopotamia on both sides for quite a long distance. And so if the Tower of Babel thing were literal, like the creationists contend, the whole thing has to be literal, then that doesn't work. Because they're all speaking the same language.
Maybe if the civilization that built Bronze Age submarines and went to the Americas hadn't destroyed itself, as we read in the Book of Mormon, we might still have this story.
Yep, I blame the stripling young warriors or whatever.
That was a different civilization. Because the Book of Mormon tells essentially the same story twice.
Well, I mean, it's following in the grand tradition of Scripture.
Well,
Hindi was related to German, but apparently the linguists do.
Yeah, and so I had a graphic there of this family tree, and I'm putting up another graphic kind of showing you how these words could be related. Here's the word two, T-W-O, as in the number two. And if you compare it to many of these other PIE languages, you see like dos, duo, tu, trois. They're all very similar. And so linguists have linked this back to one word, dwoh, D-W-O-H. And that's what they guess the original language for this family would have looked like. So the number two all goes back to this one common word. And there are other words, not just the number two, but this is a really good example of that.
And so,
listen, if you're going to annoy me this badly, at least invest in a mechanical keyboard so we can hear the good clacking.
It's true. People love the typey types, or so I'm reminded in the comments section every time I typey type without muting.
I don't know if you noticed that, but I did.
Words can have a common ancestor, unlike proteins.
Yeah.
Which we learned from. Which when did we learn that on?
Also worth noting, Indo-European as a language family is older than the universe according to the creationist model.
Well, we all know all the languages departed from the Tower of Babel because, I don't know, maybe whatever happened in Sword Crash is true. Sorry, Snow Crash.
On Real Science Radio.
And please, do not tell me it has bad politics. It's a cyberpunk novel. No one should get their politics from a cyberpunk novel.
Recently, in an interview with Sal Cordova on proteins.
Yes, we will link to that.
Sal!
That was a fantastic.
Yeah, he's actually one of the smarter people on this channel, but he still gets quite a lot wrong.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's sort of his brand.
But languages do have a common ancestor, and I guess the earliest we can really go back is the Tower of Babel. And I think that's about when you could have pinned the Proto-Indo-European languages would have existed. So I had just, out of curiosity, Googled when the Proto-Indo-European languages...
If you read your Bible, which I assume this would be a thing they'd be in favor of, you would notice that during the time the ark was sailing around, Noah was writing down the history of humanity pre-flood. Like he spent a lot of time doing that. He devoted a lot of resources to doing that because he knew humans would not have that information except from the few survivors, because they didn't load up a library on the fucking boat. They had all these damn animals. And then Babel happened only 100 years later, after the ark situation was done. When the languages were scattered, everyone lost the ability to read Noah's old writings. And there's a whole Christian conspiracy theory about this too, that the landing site on Mount Judy in the mountains of Ararat, they built a monastery on the site where the ark landed to preserve the scrolls until the day when God saw fit to restore humans' ability to read the original human language. And they kept the scrolls there. So if you take the Tower of Babel story literally, you can trace the language further back than that to the pre-Proto-Indo-European language, the original human language, according to creationists. But only someone who actually read the fucking Bible would know that.
Listen, Christians don't actually read the Bible. They like to pretend they read it. Read it.
I've noticed, yes.
And it's been a while since I've read it, so. But in my defense, I had more scriptures to read than most people did.
That's true. You got a whole bonus book.
3 more bonus books. But 160 pages.
Is when linguists would have guessed that such a language would have existed, and they say probably around 2,500.
So, why is it that we can date documents before the Tower of Babel that are in different languages? Are you going to bother to explain that one?
No.
BC. And according to Answers in Genesis has estimated that the Tower of Babel was around 2,200 BC. So,
yeah, but here's the other thing. To have the population necessary to do that, I did the math once to see how long it would take to get from a population of 8 to a population of 250 million, which was the population of the world, more or less about the time of Christ. And the growth rate for the world has been fairly consistent until about the 1700s, where it was 0.04%. So I did it 2 different ways. I used a formula using logarithms. There's another one you can use. And the thing is, it would take about 40,000 years for the population to grow that much, even if there were genetic problems with it.
They for a couple hundred years, it was all quintuplets and higher.
Yeah, but I was going to say, that's not getting into the problems with biology with it.
about that time frame would have been whenever God split the languages, and Proto-Indo-European would have been one of those languages, it seems.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So, but going back to the word gender, the topic of today's show, when we look at the
Oh, they were talking about another topic. Okay.
Webster's 1828 dictionary, we can see that this word was also used as a verb.
Why
to beget
are we going to the 1828 dictionary? Surely there's a more updated edition available, at least one since 1828. I wonder if they might be cherry picking something here. It's a mystery.
Which is why in the King
It's almost like when Ben Shapiro ignores the DSM-5 and reads like the previous definition for gender identity disorder in the DSM-4 because he wants to call it a mental illness.
James, we should give a warning.
Warning, 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 Will Robinson. There are Bible verses up ahead. For those in
Oh my gosh, that was annoying.
the audience who advocate pluralism and diversity, we know here at Real Science Radio that you would send...
Wait, what is wrong with diversity?
There's not enough pie up here. I don't know.
Who would dare quote a Bible verse in public. So this warning gives you fair notice. Raw, unadulterated truth is a...
Oh, come on.
Oh, I thought he said a Bible verse was coming. Are we getting truth or a Bible verse? Because you can't have both, my friend.
Yeah, some Bible verses are relatively unambiguous.
About to be uttered.
That's right. So we go to Leviticus chapter 19, verse 19. It says, quote, "Thou shalt not let thy cattle gender with a diverse kind," unquote. And also in 2 Timothy 2:20, quote, "But foolish and unlearned questions avoid, knowing they do gender strifes," unquote.
Okay, so the word we probably use for this now is engender. Congratulations, you've proved language changes over time.
So we typically don't use the
Okay.
word gender as a verb today, but it was prevalent in the...
No, we use the word gender as a verb. For example, he gendered me correctly.
Right, yeah. Sorted into categories.
past. King James is evidence for that. But we mostly use it as a noun today. So that brings us back to gender as a...
Oh my gosh! This is an amazing discovery. Did he use his microscope to find out words can be more than one part of speech?
case system in grammar.
Okay, now before we jump into gender as a case system, let me just see if I'm understanding here. So thou shalt not let thy cat.
It's just a spoiler alert. I'm just going to tell you, no, he's not understanding.
No, I
Oh,
don't see a whole lot of understanding in this whole thing. What he says, you want gender clarity. They're not talking about gender in the way anyone means it. They're constructing a false etymology about it, further muddying the waters and not providing any clarity about the actual subject people who might be interested in at all.
I'm sure she has a relevant degree in, I don't know, maybe political science or something like that.
Maybe.
Or she got her degree on Twitter. I mean, have you ever noticed how many people on Twitter have 3 advanced degrees in whatever topic you're arguing about?
And it's different every day. It's magical. It's a miracle.
So in that phrase, gender has something to do with breeding.
Yep.
So one could say that it has something to do with sex in the breeding sense, but it doesn't have to do with sex in the male-female categorization sense. And then in the Apostle Paul's instruction to...
How isn't he like the first guy to hold up a sign and saying, if you want to produce offspring, you need to have male-female sex? Isn't that his entire thing? What does he mean it's not the same thing?
I don't know.
Timothy, he's saying avoid unlearned questions, knowing that they do gender strifes, meaning they cause.
Avoid unlearned questions. Okay, so don't ask stupid questions. That's what I'm getting from that verse. What does this verse have to do with anything you're talking about?
It's their self-owned, their ironic moment of bringing up a Bible quote that is talking directly about what they are doing in this moment. They're asking foolish questions in order to specifically make people dumber.
Oh, I wish I thought of that one, Angier.
Something to happen.
Yes.
So neither of those have to do with a male-female sex construct.
Right, not inherently. And, you know, as we get into this, like the case systems.
All right, maybe I've been playing too much fantasy or reading too much steampunk, but the phrase male-female sex construct did not...
What are those damn constructs doing now?
Did not cause me to picture what he wanted me to picture, I don't think.
Like I was saying, so the Proto-Indo-European languages, I'm just going to start calling them the Pi languages because that's much easier to say. So a lot of the Pi-derived languages have a tooth-case system, masculine, feminine, or a 3-case system, masculine, feminine, and neuter. But if you go outside of the Pi languages, you have Zulu, for example, which has 17 genders. 17.
Wow, that's got to make conjugating verbs hard.
Indeed. But also, it just makes me think of all these other conservatives who lose their shit over there. How many genders? I just want to take that clip of her so I can play that every time. There are 17 genders.
Well, there are 2 genders on this channel, 0 and 1.
Oh, the Zulus must be popular over at the UN.
Was that supposed to be a joke?
I was kind of thinking that too. I'm like, I got a 404 error, punchline not found. Like, I know jokes are funnier if you explain them, but maybe he should explain that one.
I think the whole idea is the UN is woke with all their genders. It's like, first of all, most governments in the UN are fairly conservative. And I don't think the UN is as woke as you think it is.
And this shows that gender is not distinctly male and female, or it doesn't have to be based off male and female as a category. And I'm putting up a chart here, and this is a category for people, not necessarily male and female, but you can see the word for boy, child, friend, parent, and person here all have a similar shape at the beginning. It all starts with So the word for boy is
All right, I know you probably failed grade school grammar, but we call those words prefixes.
Details. Parts of
Ana,
speech.
child, toi.
Well, no wonder they're having such a hard time with pronouns. They haven't mastered other parts of speech yet.
Ana, friend is umgane, parent umzali, and person umuntu. And for any of our Zulu speakers out there, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. I tried. But you can see there that
we invite any Zulu speakers to call with corrections.
Listen, Schnickel Fritzes, get off this point.
Yes, absolutely. But you can see my point is that they all have that first distinguishing that the noun here is talking about a person, and then the ending differentiates, it specifies what kind of person are we talking about. So that's how these nouns work
categories.
in standard language. These
are universal across the human experience.
I muted you somehow.
Oh no. I was saying it's universal across the human experience that we categorize people.
Ember, you're muted?
I am not. I mean, I'm not on my end anyway.
All right, can you speak now?
Yep, now I can. How can you hear me now, as the commercial says?
I cannot hear you.
And Jer says I'm coming through.
All right, it's got to be on my end then.
We broke it, folks. In under an hour, even.
Hold on. I'm going to reconnect in a second here.
We need some hold music. Do 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 do. So let's see. What can we plug? Well,
what's going on with this?
I don't know. I just work here. This is your friendly reminder to like, subscribe, share, tell your friends.
On my end.
And counter the apologists. Shoot. A girl from Ipenham. I gotta look that up. Because that's I don't know. Maybe I've had a rough day, folks. Girl from Ipanema. I don't know. Is a beloved Brazilian bossa nova song written by Antonio Carlos Jobim and Vinicius de Moraes, Vinny, with an English translation by Norman Gimbel. It was made popular by Stan Getz, Joao Gilberto, and Astrid Gilberto in their 1964 recording. The song's story is set in the Brazilian beach neighborhood of Ipanema in Rio de Janeiro, inspired by the daily walk of Heloisa Pinheiro. Oh my goodness, I've got to learn my continental languages better. I could almost feel a flow sometimes, but I don't have the phonemes down, It tells of an admiring observer who watches a young woman walk to the beach, feeling both admiration and a sense of sadness about youth and beauty. Ipunimo. It sounds almost Italian. It's a spicy meatball, but it is okay. Popular as elevator music. You would recognize it if you heard it. I might. I don't know. I'm just here. Oh, goodness. Technical difficulties. So I was trying to look back and see what the timestamp was in case Sinister has to completely restart.
All right, here we are. Sorry, I don't know what happened.
When we break shit, we break it good.
Well, I think it's a USB hub that probably needs to be replaced, but
Damn USBs and their husbands.
and sorry, continue. Or I can not restart. Continue with the video.
Yeah,
I
we
need
can
to
do
reshare
that.
the video. That would be a good place to start.
More video or something. I'm just here.
The different shape is the inflection of the noun. And
Okay.
so
And none of the 17 genders in the Zulu language have to do with male, female, gender fluid, gender.
Yeah, it's almost as if gender, when used in language, doesn't mean the same thing it means when we apply it to people.
Gender unconcerned, gender inconsiderate,
right, that's
gender confused, or any of that stuff.
yes.
I mean,
that
we do
all-
the same thing too. We break people into categories that could be correctly described as genders that have nothing to do with either reproductive capacity or social roles that relate to typical reproductive capacities. Like, for example, firefighters, EMS workers, police, we call them first responders, but we can break them down into individual genders. What flavor of first responder are you? Are you a police person? Are you a fire person? Are you a medic person? Are you a mailman? Like, there's so many ways this can be applied.
whole thing came much later, long after Zulu was around. But then if we go back to the Pi languages, there are also some languages that don't have gender systems like Turkish, Persian, and English. English does have gender for the pronouns, and the reason is that's just
And a few other select words.
leftover of the old English system that used to be gendered for all of its nouns. So, like, if you're familiar with Spanish, you would know that there's masculine and feminine and neuter. So, like,
There is no neuter in Spanish.
la mesa, the table, is feminine. El tomate is masculine. The tomato is masculine in Spanish. But in English, we would just say the table, the tomato. We use the same article, and the ending doesn't really specify anything in our nouns.
That is not always true.
Mm-hmm. Like we see a lot of nouns that are gendered, literally categorized, like actor and actress. Although, we're trying to get a bit more inclusive about that, but we see this sort of shit all waiter and waitress. It's all across English.
Well, not to mention how many of a thing you have is determined literally by the ending.
Pluralization.
I mean, English doesn't have as many endings as some other languages. But if we want to make something plural, for most words, we add an S.
But we do, but in Old English, it used to be that we did have these masculine, feminine, and neuter genders, and we lost those between the 11th and 14th century as the language lost its inflection, and our sentence structure, English syntax, became much more rigid. So now we typically use a subject, verb, object order. So, like, I would say, I ate the soup. I could say the soup I ate, but that sounds weird, and it's maybe you might see that in poetry, but it's not really standard English. Maybe an uneducated person might say something like that. But that was
So you use it all the time? Sorry, go ahead.
So one of the things I learned from studying foreign languages in basic education in high school is that most of the European languages have their sentence structure. They speak like Yoda, right? Like it's warned you I did, strong the dark side is. That's where the phrase to turn a phrase comes from. When you're translating from English into any other European language, you have to turn the phrase, or it won't make sense. It'll sound just as silly as the examples that she was just giving, because the rest of Europe does it in the Yoda style structure. That's where Yoda got the structure from. And yeah, we tend to put words in a certain order. This has actually been studied in some very interesting ways. Like there's an order that we instinctively, from exposure to other English speakers, tend to put our adjectives. And I could do a whole rant on that. Let's just skip it because it's late and there's a lot of more video to say. But yeah, every language is going to put things in a different order, but that's not always true. This stratified version of English that she's referring to is a specific style of an academic format. There's different variations, there's different versions. There's Chicago style, there's APA style, and so on and so forth. They're mostly the same because our academia is broadly compatible with each other, but not everyone speaks that way or writes that way. And you only have to look at internet lingo to see immediately the deviation, the huge amount of diversity in the way people communicate. There's generational differences, there's regional differences. I mean, Joe from the Kentucky Atheist, for example, likes to say, when he means I wouldn't mind to discuss a thing, I don't care to discuss a thing. He means I don't care if we discuss the thing. Oh. But the way it comes off to, a Northeasterner like me is he's saying, I don't care about the subject, but that's not his actual intention, because the way we organize our sentences varies by region and all sorts of freaking characteristics and factors and elements. So this English is a very structured, very precise language, is kind of elitist. Well, the dictionary says a thing, and we know these people love their dictionaries as long as the dictionary says what they want it to say.
Well, if you assume whatever is in a really old book must be true. But coming back to Ember's point, I grew up in Pennsylvania Dutch country, and if you listen to me long enough, you will hear some bizarre grammar constructions come out of me. Because up until very recently, most people who grew up where I grew up spoke a version of German called Deutsche, which is the Pennsylvania Dutch dialect, and English. So even today, part of the effect of that is there's bizarre grammar constructions that aren't correct for either language that get used just because it's a thing. And former roommate of mine will use the phrase, it wonders me, to mean it makes me wonder. And I have to say, stop that. You're not Pennsylvania Dutch.
I mean, I kind of dig it. There's a few authors who write in very idiosyncratic ways. There's a book series, Uglies and Pretties and Specials and Extras. I forget the author because my brain is shot right at the moment, but they made Uglies into a Netflix thing. But details. They have all kinds of colloquialisms, like this person is brain missing. I'm like, it's descriptive. The words are in the wrong order and it's missing a few, but it's kind of charming because it's shorter and much more illustrative than if you phrased it properly,
Yeah, she feels it wonders me is more efficient.
Yeah.
Fairly common in Old English. It wouldn't have sounded as weird because the different inflections in the noun would have been very clear what the subject and what the object was.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And
boom, there it goes. Bye.
Verb object was the most common word order, but you could switch them around. And in a highly inflected language like Greek, where the nouns have different endings and different articles depending on what part of speech they are, you can make word salad and it still makes sense. If it's not confusing, it doesn't sound.
It all depends on the dressing.
So they also don't know what word salad is.
I mean, clearly, that's sort of their entire thing.
Not only that, they're making the redeem zoomer error, where they're confusing an abstraction for the thing itself.
Ah, the reification fallacy, one of my personal favorites.
Whereas in English, you have to be very specific. You would have to be very, you'd have to add more words to clarify what you mean.
No, you don't have to do anything. If I totally make up a new word and people understand what I mean, that is now a legitimate word.
Oh, for sure. You don't need, I mean, specificity can be useful, but sometimes it's inefficient. Like, when I worked as a repossession agent, a good chunk of my time was spent in the garages evaluating the vehicles. And I know so little about how cars work and mechanics tools and whatnot. So if I needed to like unscrew something, I would say, hand me the thingy. And the person that I was working with would hand me whatever freaking thingy I needed. Like, I was very not specific and I still successfully communicated, you know?
So you could put together word salads and basically be a speechwriter for any number of candidates for higher office these days. And so this does.
Ironically, he got that one right without knowing what the word meant.
Stop clock twice a day.
That with English, there has been a devolution of the language. The language has become less sophisticated and,
well, no,
I would say,
according to whom? Just because you don't like, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Is he may not like the direction it's going, but we're adding new words and increasing specificity, which is the thing he was just saying was so goddamn special with every passing year. I mean, our dictionaries are freaking exploding. We have to have abridged dictionaries to have them on our desk now because they're starting to look like freaking encyclopedias with multiple volume sets. Like we're adding medical terms, we're adding scientific terms, we're adding more definitions to existing words in order to increase our ability to communicate in a highly specific way in order to get a very specific meaning across when it's necessary to do so.
Not to mention, I have a feeling American English is going to become a hybrid of English and Spanish.
It's a distinct possibility.
a little more legalistic and a little more rigid, right?
Yeah, we've definitely lost, and this happens just because of various influences. Like I had mentioned earlier, people say language changes, and really the reason language changes is because of various influences, whether another country comes in, like William the Conqueror came in the 11th century, so we now have a lot of French loan words in our language, or cultural influences might have affected language changes. So all these various influences have caused us to lose our.
What was that edit? I saw that edit where the guy's head like jerks off to the side real quick, like he didn't move, it just was here and then it was here. Did he cut out a section of his own daughter's speech? Is he that brain missing that he's like, you know what? I can't follow this. Nobody else is gonna either. Let's just jump to the point.
It might have just been like an edit for just clarity, or maybe there was a pause, or maybe there was just too many.
Nah, he cut out content. I would bet a nickel on it.
Well, it's not like anything he says. It's not like anything he cut out is going to make this any smarter.
That's true, but like, I don't know. I mean, obviously, I'm not on Team Daughter here, but when somebody's in the middle of a mini lecture or even a full-on rant or whatever about a thing they're passionate about, they should have the right to say the whole damn thing, you know?
Well, I'm sure she has this job because it's team nepotism anyway.
It's true, yeah.
Make our sentences more rigid, and now we generally have to use more words to describe what we mean. So I have this here. This is a book, Beowulf, and Beowulf is the English language's oldest epic, and I have it in parallel. So it has the Old English over here on this page, and on the other page in Modern English. And if you just look at what I'm holding up, you can see that the Old English had.
It's the oldest remaining epic that's still complete. Like, we covered this in 8th grade English, right? We had to read Beowulf because it's the oldest of the old and whatever. And storytelling has come a long way. It is not a sophisticated story by any stretch of the imagination, though it does have some very interesting fantasy elements in it, but I do digress. The point is, we're claiming it is English, but it's not really any more English than modern French is. In fact, it may even be less. It's got strong Scandinavian influences. It's got, pre-French influence. It's wild. It really is a very different language. It's more like an ancestor rather than a variation of the modern language. It's pretty, but I digress. The point is, there were other poets, other writers whose works did not survive, both in that time and before. And we know there were because there are older poetic epics in other languages, like Homer, for instance.
Well, I mean, sure, the Romanic languages were written down fairly late compared to like the Greek and Roman.
Per line, fewer words than compared to the modern English. And so,
Oh, wow.
So where, a sentence might have 4 words in the Old English, you might need 10 words in the modern English. So that just shows you over time. And I think that's also a reflection of general laziness in people.
No, it just means the language changed. And how is having to write more words a reflection of laziness?
I was just going to ask that. I'm like, how do you get that?
People, we start to break down, and so we need more information in order to pass on what we mean. Instead of using 1 or 2 words, now we need like 10.
Well, no, that's a matter of specificity. We see the same thing in Latin, right? Like you take a complex concept in English and translate it into Latin, and you get like 3 words back, because each of those 3 words can mean 20 different things depending on context and conjugation and all the different bits and pieces and whatnot. Because language is ultimately just a series of noises meant to communicate ideas, to transmit my thought from my brain into yours. Whatever series of noises are necessary to convey that image accurately. And the older versions of language, Old English, Latin, Ancient Greek, all of these things, they're much more simplistic in the way they transmit that information. They're very similar in that way to American Sign Language, which, while there is a vocabulary and a grammar structure, it's a lot more fluid, because following the precise rules is not nearly so important as clearly conveying your meaning. If you need to break a rule to be clear, then you fucking do it,
Right, and it's sort of an algorithm that you can watch.
Ooh, hey, I said we'd get to algorithms tonight.
You read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation.
And if there's one thing I go to solve all unsolved computer problems, the first thing I think of is the Bible.
Well, there is the Bible code, which, of course, being from the Bible, must be the perfect code. QED.
Yeah, but that doesn't really... Yeah, but it doesn't run on any system I know of.
You can see that more words are required to describe situations because the situations just become more and more convoluted. At the very beginning.
Can you grasp any harder at that straw?
Holy shit. I was just thinking, like, we're using older text versus newer text to show that the greater precision of language is somehow making things more imprecise. But is Beowulf itself a cherry-picked example? I bet you it is, because unfortunately I only have one physical Bible with me, so I can't compare. But I would bet you that if you take a New International Version and a King James Version, halfway back to Beowulf times, they're about the same size. It isn't universally true that the further back in time you go on a linear time scale, the fewer words you need.
Well, to be fair, people lived a lot longer before the flood, so maybe God had more time to explain things.
Sure.
When God was in the garden with Adam and Eve,
And I just realized someone is going to take me seriously.
he could speak in very simple terms with them.
Yeah.
But by the time it came to write the law down for the Jews, there's like 613 different laws that had to be.
Yeah.
So I see a similar algorithm in the Bible and in language.
All right, algorithm is a series of steps you follow to do something. This is not what algorithm means. That is not how mathematicians and computer scientists use the term.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so I kind of want to talk a little bit about the origin of gendered and gendered languages, because not all languages are gendered. Like Chinese, for example, has been around pretty much as far back as we can go, and it's not a gendered language. So it's not something that's necessary for language. And I think that's something that came out during the Tower of Babel. I have no other explanation. I think God's just creative, and he's just like, I'm going to do a little bit of this over here, and we're not going to do that over here. So
Worth
that's why we
noting,
have some languages that do and some languages that don't.
there are written Chinese records that predate when they think the Tower of Babel happened.
There are also written Chinese records where they don't record a global flood.
Yeah, quite notably, in fact. And of course, there's linguistic drift in Chinese as well. Like if you took, a 9th century Chinese historical scroll, you're gonna need an interpreter because it may as well be a different language.
So in English, whenever we think of gender, we tend to think male and female. And whereas in another language that is gendered, like maybe Spanish, growing up learning that language.
No, we have neuter pronouns in English too.
It's true. It's a cultural convention that people tend to think mostly in terms of male and female when it comes to that particular gender of gendering. But that's a cultural convention. It's not necessarily the case. It's not universally true.
Yeah, we just kept the gendered pronouns for some reason.
Language, you wouldn't really think of objects being male and female. They're just masculine and feminine, and that's just how the language is. And so whenever
Ding, 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 ding.
I study a language, like Spanish, and they say, well, the genders are just kind of arbitrary. There's no reason for the table to be feminine in Spanish while the book is masculine. And that confused me because I'm thinking, how can you categorize something arbitrarily? Like, that just didn't make sense.
She's so close to getting it. Oh my goodness.
We categorize things arbitrarily all the time.
I mean, any kind of gender, even if it makes sense, it's still done arbitrarily. They're all arbitrary because all social constructs are social constructs. The whole language is socially constructed. Holy shit. All words are made up. We agree on the meanings. Wowzers. But also, it makes me think of my first year of French when we were going through how to identify which specific nouns had specific genders. Like, the table is feminine and the chair is masculine. And I said to my teacher, why? Well, the table is masculine because it dominates the room. She tried to come up with reasons to justify it. I'm like, okay, that's wonderful. I'm so happy for you that you can come up with improvised reasoning post hoc on the spot. Fantastic, gold star for you. But what's the rationale behind it? Because unless you plan to teach us every single noun, we need to know the mechanism. What makes a thing masculine or feminism, so that when we encounter a new noun that we didn't study in this class, we're able to gender it correctly. And she didn't know.
Yeah,
I don't know if anybody does.
French doesn't do that. Spanish does. As does Italian, I believe.
And as I was
Yeah.
studying this, I realized it's because I'm looking at it backwards. So let me kind of try and walk through this to help.
A
Wait,
creationist admitting they're looking at things backwards. Mark it on the fucking calendar.
You understand where I'm coming from. So if we go back in time to the Sumerian languages, which the linguists have.
Doug, I love how your eyes have glazed over like this doesn't interest you.
I know he asks his own daughter on to talk about gender, but without talking about gender in the way everyone means gender. And then he's like totally uninterested in what she's saying. It's amazing.
Which linguists say is the oldest known language, and they did not have the masculine, feminine.
What do they say is the oldest known language?
I mean, I'm not sure what they would say is the oldest known language, but the oldest written language would be, a flavor of Sumerian, the cuneiform probably, but the oldest written language is not the same as the oldest known language because we know humans had language before then. That's writing is a form of an existing language. Like even the ancient Neolithic pictographs, like they all had not only their own meaning as artwork, but they could also be used to symbolize certain things. And some of them will never decipher because like an image of a dude holding a spear in a certain way, that could be a picture of Frank. And so every time you see that particular rendition of a human, it's supposed to be Frank, and it might be representing the F sound. It might. We don't know because we don't know what the people who did it were thinking at the time, but that kind of shit happens all the damn time.
Aunt Jer asked us, what point are they trying to make?
Unclear as yet. It seems to be that everyone is wrong about what gender even means. And to understand the truth, you need to ignore the Bible.
I think they're trying to say we should only use gender to refer to words, and therefore trans people don't exist.
Or we're words, which makes us God, according to the Christians.
But
because the word was with God and the word was God, right?
Or it's possible his daughter does not agree with his religious views and just wanted to be a language nerd.
Maybe.
That would be kind of cool, actually. Like if she has a degree in linguistics and just wanted to be a language nerd.
Distinction, but rather a human non-human distinction. And then later on, the Hittite language, which branched off the Proto-Indo-European early on, had an animate and non-animate. So kind of going from human to non-human, now you have like animate, meaning you could include animals and maybe some plants. So you're getting a little bit more specific.
There we go.
And then later on down the line, you get this from animate,
everything in language. Everything in language. It's really obvious with the way the language tends to break genders, but everything in language is all about utility. What's it for? What's the need?
And what concept are we trying to convey with this word?
Animate. Now you have neuter, masculine, and feminine. And it's attributed to a man named Protagoras, who was a Greek philosopher and rhetorician. Linguists say he was the first to label nouns as masculine, feminine, and neuter. So I think up until this time, in history, peace is not very common. You're almost always fighting some battle or some blight, just trying to survive. So I don't think many people really had the time to sit down and analyze and categorize languages. But then in the 5th century BC, and we get this source from Aristotle, he says Protagoras was the one who kind of sat down and he was fascinated with grammar. And he's like, I see a pattern. We have these 3 categories, and I'm going to classify them as male, female, and neuter. And I think the reason he classified it as male, female, and neuter was because that's a concept anyone can grasp, right? Masculine, feminine.
Is it?
Male, female.
What a masculine and feminine mean? I mean, we have kind of an intuitive, a loose sense of understanding from cultural context clues if we were raised in a culture that uses those categories. But if, you say you're born in a coma and you woke up today and somebody said to you, well, we have to categorize things based on masculine and feminine and neuter, you'd be like, the fuck do those things mean? It's not clear within the term itself. You still have to define the category and then use the category as shorthand for the thing you're talking about.
And neuter are three very distinct categories. At least we knew that up until modern times. And so
They're still distinct categories.
Mm-hmm. The
Adding
meanings
new
may have shifted.
Adding new categories doesn't make the old ones less distinct.
Yeah, and also this whole thing of it being just the three, she's already debunked that point herself. She's brought up other languages where there are a different number than three. Some have 0, some have 17. English is one example, and even then that's not strictly true because it's come up a couple of times. We just had Trans Plus History Week a little while back, and one of the stories that came up happened to be some shenaniganery going on between the Victorian era writers, where there was sort of a blending between what today we consider gender and sexual orientation. And there were a whole lot of queers. There were so many lesbians. There were so many gay men, especially in the poetry and epic writing circles. Nathaniel Hawthorne and
Oscar Wilde.
well, possibly. I'm Moby Dick guy. I forget his freaking name. Like I said, my brain is shot. Melville, yes. Melville was wooing the hell out of Hawthorne and got rebuffed, and there was drama, and it was so queer. It was so queer. But all these people in this subculture, where if you were not a heterosexual person, not only were you queer in the way we think of it today, but your own gender identity shifted out of the cis hetero category because they were conjoined, cis and hetero, because again, different terminology than we're using today. And they would refer to themselves as Uranian, like Titan Uranus, who's a non-binary person. It's pretty fucking clever when you know that. But this concept of the Uranian gender damn near became mainstream. Until the Nazis happened and everything got weird. But yeah, for a while, educated American England, the general English-speaking world, had 4 active genders: male, female, none, and Uranian.
I also loved how they're trying to get to an equivocation fallacy, and having watched the whole thing, they never quite get there.
Yeah.
So he would look at these words and say, okay, the word for woman here has this ending and this article, and so do these words over here. All right, I'm going to classify those as the female nouns. And then
I am getting major autistic vibes off this person.
Could be.
He did the same for the male nouns, and then maybe whatever else was the neuter nouns. And there are some...
the male, the female, and the whatever else. I love it.
I don't know. I'm guessing there's probably a good chance at least one of these people here is heterodivergent.
Exceptions to the rules, but generally speaking, words have a similar ending, and words that have a similar ending will have the same article. Like in English, we have a and the as articles. Greek has a lot more depending on what part of speech the noun is. So depending on masculine, feminine,
Latin doesn't have any.
or neuter, those articles would change. And so because he was kind of the first to categorize these, he noticed that some of these feminine nouns, such as menace, which means wrath and frenzy, or pelex, meaning helmet, he said these female nouns have the same ending as a lot of these masculine nouns. So we should stop using the female articles for these and categorize this as masculine. So I guess he was going through, and he's like, some of these aren't really matching up. So anyway, that I just found that really interesting. And
so he had some influence on the structure of the language going forward after his analysis.
Yeah, it seems like, I'm not sure if they categorized it to his liking or not. And like I said, I'm not really familiar with Greek, but it was interesting. He noticed these patterns, and he's like, wait, these don't really fit. So going back to, I said it was confusing to me that the masculine, feminine, and neuter were arbitrary. And the reason I was thinking that is because I was thinking someone just sat down and decided this word's going to be masculine, this one's going to be feminine, and that one's neuter. But the language was already there. He was the one who just noticed the pattern and just categorized it by these
and that's an important distinction that they seem not to be noticing. Is it wasn't that this dude sat down and he declared which things were which. It's that he observed the way it was being used and noticed a pattern and wrote that down, exactly the same way dictionaries work today. They don't tell us what the word has to mean. They describe to us the way it's being used. Same thing. This person, it doesn't have like the authority of all language to declare this thing is now masculine, this thing is now feminine. He was noticing the pattern in the ways that things were being used and then wrote that down. It's much simpler.
Well, don't you know when you describe something in a book, it becomes something everyone has to do, as long as you like the book?
It's the law.
So that means we all have to now end all our conversations with so long and thanks for all the fish.
Mm-hmm. It is written.
Pick black, white, and gray. It didn't really matter what he called them. So in my English-speaking mind, I'm thinking backwards, thinking someone picked these, but that's just how language develops. So the arbitrariness comes into what words got what ending. That just kind of developed.
The words she's looking for but not using are descriptive versus prescriptive.
Mm-hmm.
Naturally, I don't know exactly what influences went in there. Maybe that was just the way God made it. That's the best I can say for that.
Or maybe, hear me out here, you should go to college and study this stuff if this fascinates you. Actually learn linguistics. I'd recommend going to Canada first.
There's an old saying, the person who speaks only one language understands none of them. And while I don't fully speak any other languages, I briefly was semi-fluent in French, but I lost that ability. I got a little bit further with German, but I lost that ability. And it's a whole thing. But I did notice in those brushes with fluency adjacents that, because again, language isn't about precise prescriptive intonations and whatnot. It's about the communication of an idea. And the more languages you have in your head, the more you can mold those ideas around and reshape them. And I mean, it's like looking through a lens. You change to a different lens, and you go from 1 through 80 on this linear number line to shift over to French, and now you're 420s. It's a minor difference, but sometimes it changes the way you see things,
Well, sadly, I can't speak Spanish very well, but I can mostly read it now thanks to Duolingo.
That's something, I suppose.
So that's the aspect of
Well, I am fluent in JavaScript.
Gender and the linguistics. And if there's any linguists out there who want to correct me, because I'm not a linguist, I'm just a word nerd, please
Okay. In all seriousness, if you like languages this much, go to school, get a degree in linguistics. You probably won't be the next Tolkien, but let's face it, even most linguists don't invent their own language and then come up with a book for it.
I'm thinking of a couple of cases where people have come up with entire languages for specific projects, like the Klingon language for Star Trek, which, to my knowledge, Dapper Dinosaur is the only person I know of who speaks the whole thing fluently. There's probably more. There's a lot of Trek nerds running around, but there's I think it was the George a large chunk of it, but they needed to bring in actual linguists for the HBO production or something like that. There's probably a few more.
Reach out.
Don't forget Sindarin.
And I will make corrections in the KGov over at rsr.org in the show notes. But now I want to get into the science of sex, male and female.
Total subject change. Love it.
And she's not going to be... Again, spoiler alert, she's not really going to get there very quickly.
Do you need to ask for the interesting fact of the week?
Oh, that's right. The interesting fact of the week. We can't forget that. Everyone's on the edge of their seat.
That's right.
Bet on whether it's actually a fact, folks, because remember, we're listening to Real Science Radio, where they prove the truth of the Bible.
So I wonder which Kent Hovind talking point they're going to bring up.
Do you think it'll be whale penises?
I doubt it.
Because whale penises have been coming up a lot this week.
All right, so
let's hear it.
What do you call an animal with both male and female characteristics?
Animal with both male and female. David Bowie.
That would not be his first. Let's just call them jokes this stream. And it's certainly not the first one where he failed to be funny.
He's not even in the right category, if you will. So we need more context to actually answer this. I suspect she's hinting at hermaphrodite, but there are species where there aren't sexes per se, or there's species where every member of the sex has the capacity for both large gametes or small gametes, or however the fuck you want to break up the sexes. Lots of species have both.
No.
No?
Not quite.
Okay, well, I have absolutely no idea what you would call that, but I'm sure you're going to tell me.
Yes, the answer is gynandromorph.
Gynandromorph. Okay, well, if I would have taken a little bit more time and
if you want to break down the word and get into the specific meaning, because this isn't a real word, right? It's a pseudo compound word where they've taken multiple prefixes and jammed them together in a kind of German way to try to force it into being a single word. Gynoandromorph, meaning
which is
woman shape and male shape. Yeah, oh my goodness.
But I think it is an actual word that's used in biology.
I mean, anything can be an actual word, but it doesn't develop the same way other words do. It was constructed.
Well, I mean, we do the German style compounding thing in English.
Probably.
Understanding of Latin and English. I probably could have come up, because it sounds like someone just mashed that word together.
Pretty much. It might be pronounced gynandromorph, actually. I'm not totally sure. But gyno meaning woman, andro man.
Andro.
So there you go.
I get it. I mean, it makes sense to me. I could see how that word evolved.
So anyway, there you go. And I got some pictures up showing you it's a butterfly, a lobster, and a couple birds. And these animals sometimes have something goes wrong in their genetics, and they have 50% male, 50% female, and the internal organs reflect that as well, not just the outside.
That's also not the word for that.
No, that's very much not. It's so the word itself just means a mixture of characteristics specifically applied to genetics, genetic and epigenetics. So you could have somebody who has one set of reproductive organs and one set of genitalia that may or may not match, and one set of secondary sexual characteristics that may or may not match. All you need to qualify is that you have genetics that exhibit both sets of characteristics. And they don't even have to be exhibited together for the word to qualify as the way it's constructed. But also, the things she showed on screen, I don't know all of them down to the nitty gritty, but the cardinal, for example, that's not what's happening in the cardinal. But so the thing with the cardinal, when we see that sort of dimorphism, it isn't because it's a chimera like me, where it's got half of its cells are the female type and half of its cells are the male type. It's got one genetic code, and early in its zygotic state, there was a cell division error. In birds, for example, the females are ZW genes, and the males are, I believe it's ZZ. So when the cells divided, the one side got the Z and the W, but the other side only got the Z. So even though there is a W, it's still half of the body manifested as if it were female, not because it has a completely different set of genetics like a true chimera that happened to be female. It's the same genetics, but it missed out on one of the chromosomes, and so it develops as if it were the other. And it's an important distinction because it's still the same genetic code. It's one critter, as opposed to, say, twins that smoosh together into a single being like yours truly.
Well, all right. Let's go on and see how they're going to offend intersex people and what joke Doug is going to make, because Doug really belongs at our local stand-up open mic nights.
Oh my.
Okay.
This is an anomaly. This is not something that is normal.
Right.
What
And
the
so
fuck is normal? We're talking about, oh my goodness. So the average cup size for the North American female happens to be a D. So if you have D cups, you are normal. If you're a B or a C or an A or a double D, you're an anomaly, and you can go fuck yourself, I guess.
Well, I think he's confusing how common something is with normal. A lot of things happen in biology that are just weird.
that I don't want to imply that there was anything like that going on with David Bowie. That was
No.
David Bowie does not deserve your ire. I mean, he does deserve the ire of some people, but you're not one of them. If I recall the stories about him correctly.
No, this.
he's without excuse for how strange he was. Anyway.
No, yes.
Okay, so
Well, one of you made millions of dollars and was famous, and the other one is a Kent Hovind fanboy.
Yeah, you know, details. Like, they still don't seem to get that, especially when it comes to rockers, the strangeness is by design. That's intentional.
So these anomalous, maybe you would even call them deformities?
Yeah, I would call them a deformity because it negatively impacts the organism. As far as I know, a gynandromorph cannot reproduce. And this is, and like I showed in the picture, a lobster, a butterfly, and a bird, it really only affects birds, insects, and crustaceans. It doesn't affect people. So some people will claim that there are intersex, but that's not what this is. That's not what a gynandromorph is. An intersex person is just someone who had something go wrong developmentally to where their sex is not very clear. But they're still one or the other.
Except when we're not, but detail.
So, funnily enough, and I have no reason to think I'm intersex the way it's meant, but the thing is, it is possible that binary trans people are caused by essentially an intersex condition of the brain.
It's possible. The jury is still out. We do have data that indicates in that direction, but it is far from a settled conclusion. But also, it's possible that we're all chimeras, like yours truly. Just the fusion takes place in a different. There's a genetically viable survival strategy involved here, because humans do this thing with the big brains, right? So we may be inclined to have a portion of our population that will always produce more twins. There's a little genetic tweak floating around in the population, and sometimes that's useful. So it stays viable in the overall population, so that when a plague comes through or whatever, we can repopulate slightly more quickly. But also because we invest so much energy into both our own brain development and the development of our offspring, that sometimes it's advantageous to take that propensity for twins and produce a single embryo that you can put all your energy into. So, yeah, TLDR, geneticists estimate that up to 10% of the population might be chimeras. They're not always sexually mixed chimeras, but it could be. So, long story short, if 10% of the population could be fused twins, potentially, I mean, Punnett squares, there's a 50-50 chance that you have different sex chromosomes. You could very easily have an XX head on an XY body, or vice versa. We could all be chimeras. We need more science to find out for sure.
Well, changing your chromosomes is something that can happen, and they don't realize that. But like I said, biology is weird.
Yeah, but at the very least, trans people do exist at the very least, an induced intersex state. Although they're talking specifically about gamete production without actually saying so, because specificity, who needs it?
I'm sure there'll be, I'm so happy these people stopped bothering left-handed people decades ago.
Those anomalies.
Just the physical development went wrong somewhere, and it's not just the reproductive organs that get affected. It's also typically the joints are misshapen, or you have weak ligaments.
As someone with a hypermobility syndrome, may I just say, go do something anatomically impossible to yourself?
Their physical problems to organs. It's not just one aspect. It's bad for the entire body.
I see. And I remember, by the way, back during
I've heard being a cis woman is bad for the entire body, because you have to bleed every month.
Was it just
I don't know if you're trying to talk, but you're muted at the moment.
Sorry, my headphones cut out.
Pesky headphones.
They might need to be replaced.
It has been known to happen.
All right, did I get sound back?
I can hear you now.
All right, yeah, I got sound back in my headphones.
Yay! And now we've lost audio on the video. Or at least I have.
I really love that these people think about trans people and what they do more than I do. I certainly spend most of my day thinking about this guy's genital status.
I don't know. Thinking about people's genitals, I guess everybody needs a hobby, but it sure seems to be a popular hobby among conservatives. Yeah, I can't hear him at all right now.
Huh, that's interesting. Did I actually lose the... Let's reshare. I don't know if it might... because it could be just an issue with the.
Technical difficulties, one of the joys of live broadcasting.
We always knew was abnormal and sad, by the way.
Yeah. Like I said, this is
Being intersex is sad?
I mean, I don't know. There are certain things about it that could make a person sad. And of course, there's so many different intersex conditions because, as per usual, we're not talking specifically about gametes. We know intersex people aren't so named because there's an intergamete. It's because of the sexual characteristics, whatever. But I mean, I suppose, like, I've known people with, say, androgen insensitivity were like,
Ow,
I could never be a trans man because I'm completely resistant to androgens. And then there's, other people who are like, I wish I had your deformity because I wouldn't have to fuck around with electrolysis. I wouldn't have facial hair in the first place. So, grass is always greener, maybe.
it impacts people negatively who have this deformity. So sex, and let's just clarify, I'm talking about males and females. So we're getting into biology. It's a lot more cut and dry.
No, it really isn't. The problem is you want to make this a strict binary, and it's not. It's okay to say sex is dimorphic in humans, but it's not even dimorphic in all mammals, if I recall correctly. Which I may not, because I'm not a biologist.
And humans are barely sexually dimorphic. Like, if you take anything that you can detect a difference between sexes, you're going to see a range within each sex, and those ranges are going to overlap more than the exceptions are separated. Like, if you want anomalies, it's those people who don't fit into the crossover range where it could be either.
So let's help Doug understand this a bit. And I'm going to put this in computer science terms, so I might lose you, Doug. But sex is not a strict binary where there's 0 and 1. It's more like fuzzy logic where you have variables in between 0 and 1 when you're talking about biological sex.
Yeah, it's not a single data point. It's, they like to say a constellation because there's a whole bunch of different data points. That, I mean, hell, even the original queen transphobe, what's her damn name? I want to say Reynolds. Again, brain is shot. She wrote the Transsexual Empire. Yeah, I'm going way back in time. Janice Raymond. Haha, there it is. Yay, go brain. She listed 6 criteria that determine whether a person is truly male or female, and it was, off the top of my head, I may get these wrong, but it was along the lines of genitals, chromosomes, secondary sex characteristics, psychology, legal status, and hormone levels. Out of her criteria, the founder of modern turfdom's criteria, a trans person who goes through a social and legal transition already meets the standard of being 50-50 on the fence, like, you don't even have to actually, and this is, I'm not a medicalist, but from that point of view, you don't even need to have surgery, and you're already, by her criteria, half of your checkboxes are male and half of your checkboxes are female. So what do we mean?
Well, I was going to say, I think Judith Butler kind of nailed it more, but she's not a TERF. I don't think, but Judith Butler is hard to understand.
Oh, Judith Butler?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's just a straight up philosopher. She's gender. She takes the idea that gender is a construct to another level, that it's like, it's not just a construct, it's a pretend construct.
Well, gender is an act you perform.
Yeah, it's theatre. And, and what a lot of people don't understand about Butler is that their work is philosophy. It's not a hard science. when they talk about gender being a performance, they don't mean it literally, as in it's just acting, learning a script and whatnot. It's meant in a sort of mental way to convey an underlying concept, a meta-linguistic communication, if you will.
Well, part of the problem is they're conflating two different things because they never get the distinction between biology and sociology correct. Because sex, when you're going to refer to it in biology, has a specific meaning. Gender, when we generally use it in conversation, is more of a sociological construct.
Yeah, I mean, sex in a social setting is itself a construct. I mean, well, again, all language is constructed. So even when we are talking about biology, it's still a constructed meaning. It's an arbitrary thing that we all agreed on, It's reification fallacy again.
Origins
Combined with a category error.
of the word gender and gender categorizations and stuff. So explaining this will go by a lot quicker. But before we do that, a little bit of etymology. The word sex comes from the Pi root, the Proto-Indo-European root sek, S-E-K, meaning to cut, which gives us words like section, dissection, insect, and eat.
All right, next time, just skip this step if it's not relevant.
I know, it's like fluffing. I think this is actually more credibility building. Like, look at this weird esoteric knowledge. Like, we all love to nerd out about our weird esoteric knowledge. I've done it a couple of times in this video. But I think in this case, it's part of the formula, if you will. Like, I have the knowledge, so I'm the authority, trust my word. Like, without having a degree, this is the next best way to build up credibility. But it's with cherry picking again. It's taking a thing. I'm 50-50 on whether this is even accurate. Like, they know their audience isn't going to look shit up. And I do tend to look shit up, but I'm very tired. So I'm not going to look this shit up right now.
I have seen no reason to look them up because I've seen them got basic stuff wrong, that I don't trust them. And also, listen, Real Science Radio, I know you're Kent Hovind fanboys. If you need a doctorate, just buy one from Patriot Bible University.
Mm-hmm.
Even saw. And so that kind of reminds me of back in Genesis when God took woman from man, he cut her away from him. So that's pretty interesting. And
what? How was that interesting?
The whole rib surgery thing. So, I mean, you don't have to go to this hypothetical Proto-Indo-European thing. Just Latin does the job. The Latin root sex means to cut or divide, which is what you do when you break stuff into categories. Because again, Latin is about concepts rather than specific meanings. You're dividing things. We're saying this thing goes here and this thing goes here. That's all.
I don't know what the Latin word for the act was, but there is a Latin word sex, which just means six.
So people and most animals and many plants reproduce sexually. In humans, the gametes, which are the ova and the sperm, each have
anti-sex. Like, if the whole point of biological reproduction is to bring the two opposite pieces together, that's the inverse of dividing them, right?
The thing is, if you ask a biologist about sex, their next question will probably be, in which species?
Or what do you mean? Like, what's the context? Are we talking about like phenotypic presentation? Are we talking about, in internal organ structure? Are we talking about gametes? Like, in what way do we mean? What's the context?
Yeah, you can't really apply binary structures to complex organic chemistry. And these are the people who keep trying to tell me DNA is computer code.
46 to make a new human being. So the males get half and the females get the other half. And God designed these two gametes to come together to produce offspring. And so Genesis 2:24 says, quote, "Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh."
That's
So
a full
God-
Bible verse, because this is Adam speaking to posterity. How does Adam, who has neither a mother or a father, know what those words mean? Like, who performed the first marriage? Where did the term wife come from? Like, there's so much that's it's clearly anachronistic and was written after the fact for a thing that never happened, but whatever. It's just, there's so much wrong about all of this.
Men and women, but he still created a mechanism for them to come back together to become one.
Oh, and there's an interesting word right there that I've always wondered about, because the word cleave, so you know what a cleaver is, right?
Yeah.
You chop something with a cleaver. So cleave implies to separate, but in the text it also implies to join together, which is just really sophisticated, interesting little word.
Yeah, it's very much like sex. Sometimes it means to divide, and sometimes it means to put the pieces together. In geology, cleavage is a break in the rock.
And sometimes it can mean something completely different in a different language, where sex is the Latin word for six.
Yeah, there's so many variations, but yeah, we could have easily ended up with an English where to cleave means sex in the same way it's used here, in to differentiate between genders, or to describe the physical act of the two pieces fitting together. It would work just as well and for exactly the same reasons.
All right, it's almost midnight, and Ember told me earlier that she was in the hospital earlier. I hope everything's all right.
I mean, I survived so far.
Well,
I made it home, so we could do the thing, and it's been a fun thing. I mean, yeah, I've gotten, my blood pressure's probably gotten a little bit too high at points at our new friends here, but I like to think that we produced some entertaining and hopefully even educational content. Yeah, I just keep thinking about like examples of species that don't have male and female. Like, for example, near where I live, there's a species of sunfish in a freshwater lake where there are 3 sexes. There's female, in that she produces eggs, and then there's 2 males, using the standard conception of if you produce small motile gametes, you're a male, but they're different. They're similar enough that they can both fertilize the female's egg, but they are not the same. They're incompatible with each other. And it's weird because biology is freaking weird. There's one flavor of male that's like this big hulking sumo wrestler male, and he will build the nest and then lure the female in, and she will be in the center of the nest, and then he'll try to mate with her. But that second category of male looks like a female and will try to distract the other male, get him to waste his reproductive material, and then mate with the female to put eggs in the nest, the big so it's weird. But there's 3 sexes. We only call them males because we're trying to fit them into our arbitrary boxes, but really there are 3 distinct sexes that do different things, Yeah,
and there are some fungi that have over 6,000, I think.
Wee.
But I'm not a biologist. So I did give Ember the choice of like just saying, hey, if you don't feel up to it, don't come. But where can people find you, Ember? Ow.
I'm all over the place. Find me on the YouTubes for counter apologetics and anti-pseudoscience stuff and debate reviews. Doing one of those tomorrow, in fact, with my friend Mark Reed at Better Than Ember. Or find me on all the other places I am, like Transposition, sometimes over on Skeptic Haven and Instagram, all sorts of stuff. My links are all on betterthanember.com.
All right, and I am the Mad Computer Scientist. I did record a video about AI and copyright, which was relatively short. I will try to get it up soon, because honestly, the issue about AI and copyright is more legal than computer related, and I don't know where that's going to go. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to go watch Real Science Radio, I don't recommend it, but if you want to say, hey, I saw your video, I liked it, whatever, or didn't like it, because if you
enjoyed your content, it amused me.
Because if you actually go to most of their videos, most of the people commenting on them are making fun of them, which is kind of mean. Don't do that. But I understand it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I want everyone to have a good night and go out and write some code.
Woohoo!